And welcome to Designation, welcome to WeWork. We really appreciate you guys being here today. This is the sort of master introduction to everything about designation, everything that you would want to know, things you didn't care about. We're going to talk about also things that will surprise you, things that you will hopefully will be very, very informative to your decision whether or not you want to apply or join the program or partner with us in some capacity. Because this is pretty much it, and you all are very scattered, I'm not going to necessarily do the whole, you have to come to the front of the classroom business, but it would make me very happy if you could come a little bit closer and just get a little closer. You all may be in the same cohort someday, and you're going to spend 6 months of your lives together. Might as well get started now. Definitely thank you for being here. Feel free to grab food and drink at any time. Like I said, the restroom is down that hall and to the right. No problem at all. If you have any questions about getting around the building or taking advantage of the coffee or matcha taps, feel free to ask Tim over there at the front desk. He's rad. And otherwise, we're happy to answer any questions for you. So if you need to connect to Wi-Fi, make sure you connect to the WeWork guest network. That does not require a password in any capacity. And as mentioned, any food that's left over goes to people who are in the program. So you might as well enjoy it while you can, because otherwise they are vultures, and they will just scavenge all the food they can. And that is one of the advantages / disadvantages of coming to designation. So thank you for being here. Again, this is sort of a big introduction here. My name is Mike Josie. I'm the president of designation. We also have staff-wise, we have Sarah and Courtney over here manning the virtual station over here and manning the Facebook live stream. We've got Doug over here, we've got Dan, and then that's Emily over in the corner. She's a grad of the program, currently working at Walgreens, and is here because she's brand new considering the program. So I thought we'd have her here to answer anybody's questions, especially if you're curious about what it's like to go through the program very specifically. We have her to answer the questions. And then, this is Megan. Megan's going to be in and out. She's got a bunch of meetings tonight, but we're glad to have her here. They'll sort of introduce themselves later on, sort of talk about their own phases of the program. We all run a different facet of the program, and so we all work very closely together here. And there will be various other current designers in the program. Some of our designers and residents might be wandering through here, and they might be popping in and out to answer questions. Feel free to ask questions anytime you have one. If we stop the presentation, a lot of information to go through, but if you want to stop and ask a question, very, very happy to answer any questions that you have at any point. Does anybody have any questions now before we get started? Okay, fantastic. Well, they will come. Feel free to ask them, write them down. We're also going to get questions from the virtual audience afterward. We're doing the stream of this deck, and then afterward we'll be able to see everybody's questions. So hang tight on your questions. Definitely ask them when we're finished. We would love to hear from everybody out there in remote land. So I wanted to kind of start by introducing you to a few people who've gone through designation. We've had 511 graduates, I think, as of July. And these folks are people who are every age from 18 to 60. And they've come from everywhere from 2 blocks away down the street to from Turkey, from Madagascar, from Hawaii, from California, which may as well be a different country, from Canada, from all over the world. And it's really fantastic to have met so many different types of people, come from every professional background, every age, and every sort of just the diversity is off the charts here. And it's something that we're awfully proud of, because people who come from different backgrounds, different experiences, they impact each other in really, really fantastic ways. So these people that I want to introduce you to are people who come from different backgrounds, and they've done a great job of just integrating themselves into their cohorts and leading their cohorts, and then leading their teams as professional designers since they graduated. So Melvin is one example. He worked in charter school education in Memphis, came to the program, did the UI track, and now is a UX designer and researcher in St. Louis, working in a place called Workroom. This is Jane. Jane had a psychology background and also art therapy. And she came from a bunch of different professional backgrounds, did designation in the UX track about a year ago, and is now working for a place called ZS Associates up in Evanston. This is Abigail. Abigail was doing PR also, I believe, in Memphis, and did the UX track, and she's since worked at United Airlines and Allstate. This is Priyanki. Priyanki was doing ed tech and communications. She went to UC Berkeley and then was about to go to Harvard. Before she went to Harvard, she attended designation. After Harvard, worked at the MIT Media Lab and is now at Continuum in Boston doing UX design and research. This is Damla. Damla is one of our Turkish designers from the program. I forget what her professional background is, but she eventually went back to Istanbul and is now working at a company called eFabrica. They've actually employed one or two other of our graduates also from Istanbul. This is Jeremy. Jeremy was an architect. He went to, I want to say American University in DC. And after the program, did the UX track, and after the program went to work at Moment in New York City, which was acquired by Verizon, so he's working there now as a UX designer. And this is our entire UI track for the Nectarine cohort, which came to the program about 3 years ago. Tom did graphic design, Brian did, he was a freelance motion designer. Rob was also a motion designer. Tanya worked for Jewish college communities. Kelly, I don't remember what Kelly did. No idea. Irene was a teacher, was a high school teacher, and made crafty things through Etsy. All of them went through the UI track, and they're now all working in different places. Tom is at E-Trade. Brian does freelance work. Rob is at Slalom in Boston. Tanya is at Motorola Solutions. Kelly is at Sprout Social, and Irene is at TableXI. So people who come from all over the place come together, and they go back to wherever they're from, or pick a new city, and they're able to get jobs and really focus on improving those communities at those jobs. So we're awfully proud to be able to showcase them. Again, there's almost 500 other people who we're not even showing you here, hundreds and hundreds of people who've gone through designation and had so many different experiences. A few things about what designation is and isn't that I think are really important to speak about at the very beginning here. A lot of boot camps and programs that are like designation, we call them design boot camps or developer boot camps, they're really focused on learning tools. They say if you learn X as a tool, you can be a designer, you can be a developer, you can be a marketer, whatever that is. And so that's the purpose of boot camps, and that's really not designation's purpose. Learning tools is vastly important. It is a remarkable part of this experience, but there's so much of the world about being a designer that's beyond just knowing tools. So you do learn design tools like Sketch and Illustrator and Axure and Vision, but really you learn them for the sake of adopting learning practices and being able to pick up any tool that you can think of in the future, because very, very quickly you're able to use these tools. So instead of being a place where we just focus on you learning a tool and checking a box, it really is about beginning a lifetime of learning. So being a designer is all about learning. It's learning about people that you work for, people that you design for, people that you work with, and especially about yourself as a designer and a teammate and a citizen of the world. So here's really where it begins to be able to do this stuff really, really, really fast and be able to get really good at it. Designation is also a place where you don't leave behind your old career. We've had people who came through designation who were chefs, pastry chefs, lawyers, bankers, dental assistants, graphic designers, architects, all kinds of people from so many different backgrounds. And they could not, it was impossible for them to leave behind their old career. The experiences they had as whatever professional or student that they were before designation absolutely mattered, really came into play, but how they communicated with people, how they worked together, how they approached learning, how they approached communication with clients, and so many other things. So there's a lot of your past experiences that really, really are important when you come to designation. You incorporate them in really, really interesting ways, in very important ways. In fact, anybody who really leaves behind their past life before designation, they tend to succeed much less, to a much lesser degree, than people who really embrace what they were doing before and are able to implement it into the way that they learn and the way they communicate. On the surface, designation is a UX and UI program. These are the two tracks that we have. We're going to talk about them in much more detail later. But really, you learn UX and UI to be able to communicate. Design is all about communicating an idea, communicating a need, being able to solve a problem, being able to speak to or with an audience or a city or a planet. And that's really what designation is about learning ways to communicate so many different types of communication, verbal and written and through design and through critique and through collaboration and so many other ways. Also, because we're an immersive program, this program is, what, 70, 80 hours a week at its peak. That is hard. It's just plain hard. We are not hard because we say we want to be hard and because that's just what we believe it should be. We believe that designation is a rewarding experience. And reward is not given, reward is earned. Reward is something that after you put in the work, you're able to say, yeah, I actually know the steps that I took to get here. The work was worth it. The change that I'm able to have in my career and in the ways that I think and the ways that I practice as a professional, I absolutely can see them. And so we have built designation step by step to make sure it's the most rewarding experience as possible. Aaron, our CEO, likes to say, we want designation to be the last time you spend $16,000 on anything related to education for the rest of your career. So that's really important when we can make that, when we can actually stand behind that hope and make sure that this is the most rewarding experience you can think of as a professional. Also, a few things that we are. You can see this is actually that wall right over there. We tell people when you think of designation, just follow the Post-it trail all the way into our space. That's our workroom. And that's the home for a lot of people. I mean, you don't sleep there or anything, but that's the place where you spend 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week with people who are doing the same thing. And again, these people are from all over the world, from every different background. You're really working together to create this temporary home that's really important for you and for the people around you. And everything that we do as part of designation is being as part of a team. And that team may be virtual. People may be scattered all over the world, maybe in person when you come here and you're working in that room for those 70, 80 hours a week. Because everything you do as a designer is team-centered. You'll always be on a team of other designers, a team where you'll be the only designer and you're working with lots of other people, strategists, writers, and account people, and whoever else. But we really make sure that you get so much experience working in a team while you're here. Because we're very team-centered, we're also very collaboration-centered. It's not just enough to say that you're part of a team. It's really being an active part of that team and working together so that when you are leading a team, you can pull the people up with you. And when you're supporting another leader on your team, they are also pulling you up with them. So there's a lot of that's really important with learning how to collaborate, learning how to be effective collaborators together. That is a big part of designation because it's a massive part of being a professional designer. We are totally data centered. As you can see all the Post-its, the point of a Post-it is not to just be, look like confetti everywhere. It's that every single Post-it has some kind of insight, some kind of fact, some kind of lesson that we've learned from interviewing people or testing our products with people. And we have to make sense of all of that data, all of those different points. We have to do something with them. We have to use them very effectively. We have to know which ones are not important, which ones are going to be the piece of information that's going to break the case wide open, allow us to be able to move forward into creating some sort of product. So we all have to deal with that. Similarly, designation is very much feedback centered. You will always get feedback on your work and on your thought process and on your collaboration from teammates and creative directors and design directors and product managers and so many other people in your life as a designer. So that begins on week 1 of designation. Designers who go through the program get so much feedback on their work, and that feedback is actionable, specific, and kind. It is never meant to crap on the work that you've done. It's meant to always make sure that you learn something from that. You get better at that. And ultimately, you're able to pass that feedback on to other people in the cohort below you or people who work under you as a professional designer. There's so much about, because there's so many of these experiences at designation that can be overwhelming, we build in a lot of time for self-reflection. A big part of that is journaling. Journaling is a really important part of this experience where we encourage people to think about and even put down on paper or on screen, what did I learn today? How did I grow today? How did I fail today? And when you can be in touch with your brain about how you learn, about how you grow, about how you understand these things, you become a much more effective collaborator, communicator, teammate, and really professional. So this is a big part of it. You're working on part of a team for a lot of your day. We want other parts of that day for you to be reflective on your own, to meditate in some cases, but really just to focus on what you are doing that day, because this program goes by really fast and is very intense, and we want to make sure people really reflect on their experiences here. And we're very much celebration centered. We believe in people being aware of how much they've grown in a particular week or a particular phase. We want people to celebrate that. So not just on graduation day, the last day of the program for an outgoing cohort, but throughout the week, throughout the month, we really want people to explore Chicago. We want people to enjoy themselves while they're here, and understand that this process of learning and growing, and even if it's really intensive, is also a very joyful one. We encourage people to do that. And folks who come to the program get so incredibly close with their cohort mates and the people that they encounter in this program that they're able to celebrate together easily. And that may be a 5-minute break, that may be a 1-minute awkward stretching that we do for morning huddles, and it may be working together and hanging out together after the program. We just had somebody graduate a few weeks ago who got married about 2 weeks after he graduated, and like 4 or 5 people from his cohort went to the guy's wedding. That's amazing.
In Colorado.
In Colorado, yeah, not like down the street there. And finally, one of the big things that we are is we are a dog-friendly organization. We work as an entity is dog-friendly. There are dogs not like roaming the halls, but they're around. We love encountering them. We occasionally have some dogs who hang out with us in our workroom over here, and we encourage people to also bring in their dogs. We have a one dog a day policy. We have a dog calendar that's very cute to start to fill out. Similarly, we also have people who are very allergic to dogs. We make sure that we take care of those folks also. But if you are somebody who gets a lot from having dogs around, even at a distance, this is a really excellent place for that. So the rest of our team is up here. We have folks, again, Courtney, who does community management, handles all of our admissions. Is a wonderful person on the team. Sarah, who does all of our marketing, all of our social media, so much of our communications. Played a huge role in rebuilding our website in the last few weeks. We have James and Jancy, Adam, and Joshua who do our virtual phases. Those are the phases you spend wherever you live remotely. We'll talk more about all those phases in a second. Again, we have Doug, who's our creative director for the immersion phase, Dan and Megan for the client phase. I'm the president, and then we have Aaron, our CEO. So we are a very small team, and as you can see here, only 1 or 2 people manage a particular phase. So the level of one-to-one interaction that you get with your creative director is outstanding. And we make sure that you know all of these folks here on screen pretty intimately, and you know the backgrounds that we have between all of us. We've got hundreds of years of experience in digital design and product design and graphic design, in areas surrounding that. And a lot of people who've been here for multiple years and have gone through multiple cohorts and really can talk very, very clearly about the experience here and everything that you can picture yourself going through as part of destination. A few things that are important that we want to talk about things we believe. We think it's really important to share this information so that you know what we stand for. You know some of the principles that we built this program on, because we practice these every day. And when we don't practice them, we need to be told to practice them. So it's really important that that we kind of share these right up front again, so you know what you're getting into if you decide to join the program. Empathy is part of designing for people. Empathy is the designer's primary weapon. We're able to, as designers, put ourselves in the shoes of anybody that we encounter because we have to design for them. So if we're going to design for them, we have to understand them as much as possible. And that means leaving the workroom, leaving the classroom, and going out into the world and studying people and speaking with them and getting really into their situation so we know exactly how we can solve the problem best for them, not just build something for them and hand it to them. Discovery is so important. We ask people on a daily basis to explore the internet, to find tools and resources and just really cool stuff that they see out there, cool websites and apps and great experiences and great products that are out there. We want people to stay inspired. And the best way to do that is to just keep exploring what's out there and share cool links with each other. That's a big part of this experience. Failure is unfortunately a big part of the designation experience too. Everybody fails in some capacity, and hopefully that's a small failure that you can overcome. But failure is not about failing, it's about learning how you can never make that mistake again, never possible. So it's always an opportunity to learn something new about yourself, about a process, about a thing that you're creating. That's really being resilient. It's picking yourself up and saying, I know that I can never make that mistake again. Here's how I'm going to actually do that. And we really encourage people to embrace that on a daily basis, mainly because there's no time to dwell on failure. We just, in this environment, it's too fast-paced, that people cannot stop and just dwell on that. They have to pick themselves up and get past it. So we give people a lot of tools to be able to do that on a daily basis. We practice something called MVP building. It's minimum viable product. That means it's not the product that's perfect, that's complete. It means we're going to deliver something that is workable. We're going to take people's feedback from that product and iterate on that, build something better, and release that. Get feedback, build something better, and release that over and over again. So even people who go through the program practice MVP building. They build something at the beginning in the first week of a particular phase and rework it and constantly rework it. And they're adding their knowledge and additional skills to make it better and better. And they get to that point eventually where they're extremely proud of it. It has many features and it's been very well thought through. But building that product step by step is a big part of the design experience in general. And that's a big part of our program too. We believe in flexibility because that's so important in the design world. There are so many pivots that might happen within the design process. The timeline might shift, the team might shift, the client might shift. So many things that could happen that we need people to be ready to work with whatever comes their way. So as designers, we have to encourage that people remain flexible and they're able to just get something done and keep moving even if something crazy happens. And finally, ambiguity. This is a huge part of this experience. We joke a lot on staff that the designation motto is "it depends." And that means that there are many questions that you will ask and pieces of information that you'll want to know the answer to that you hope has a right or wrong answer, a yes or a no. And often a lot of us on staff will give the answer, "it depends." That means that this option may lead to these things and may have this result and you'll end up with this type of situation. But this option has different things that come out of it and different outcomes in different situations. And you have to be able to weigh those options and decide which one is going to be right. So it's frustrating as hell to be told it depends and not be given that easy answer. But learning your way through that decision-making process and really getting comfortable with knowing how to pick the right one, that is a hugely valuable tool that every professional designer needs to have. When you have it, you can demonstrate that on a daily basis in your job as a professional designer. It just does wonders for your ability to be taken seriously and to be an effective part of the team. A couple more slides here and just the basics here. A lot of the tools that we use, some of these may be very familiar to you, but the design tools list on the left there, a couple of them work only for UI designers, UX designers, but that's primarily the tools that we can use. We have a lot of team tools. We use Google Drive and Slides and Keynote a whole lot. We also use Canvas as a learning management system. We use Slack as a communication system on a daily basis. Everybody uses an Apple laptop. That may be a question that comes up a lot. And then we go through a lot of pencils, paper, Post-its, and write on whiteboards all the time. Any questions so far? No? Anybody want to take a brownie break? That phrase does not sound right. They smell so good.
They're so good.
Okay, I'm sorry, remote folks, you can't smell the brownies. They're very good. So I want to speak a little bit about the things that happen here throughout the program. The first 12 weeks, as mentioned, are the first two phases of the program. Those are our virtual phases, so we have design essentials in the first 6 weeks, followed by the virtual phase. I'll go through these in a little more detail in a little bit, but those first 12 weeks are really about how to design. They're really focused on tools and skills. So you take the tools, the various design tools that you need to attack problems with and be able to accomplish things, and start to use those to then build a process and build a rhythm about how you turn that into a design process, about how you eventually solve bigger problems and you're able to use them in the service of creating a product. After those 12 weeks come the next 9 weeks. And the next two phases are the immersion phase and the client phase. And these are the in-person phases. And the shift here is really from designing as a set of tools and designing as a process to becoming a designer, really understanding what that difference is like. And the biggest difference there is the change from hard skills to soft skills. In these two phases, you're going to still learn a lot about design. You're going to learn even more tools, even more skills, but you're also going to learn things about communication and teamwork and resiliency and critique and collaboration and failure and all those other areas that are so important to being a designer that it's really hard. They're just hard to learn. They're hard to learn because there's not a book that can teach you those things. It's done through a lot of experiential learning. But you have to have both the hard skills and the soft skills to really be an effective designer. So we built this nice base for you about the like hard skill practice of design. Now we build on top of that all the things that surround it that are really valuable to do as a designer. And we cap that off in the final 3 weeks with the career phase. And this is another big shift. You still will be learning skills and tools, but they won't be directly applicable to the practice of design. They're more about storytelling and presentation, and even more about collaboration and interviewing and presenting yourself. Because these 3 weeks are really about telling the story of your growth as a designer. So you've gone through 21 weeks of growing week by week, phase by phase as a designer. Now you have to tell that story. That's the only way that people who want to hire you understand who you are, understand what you know as a designer. You're going to tell these stories through case studies and through your portfolio, through a lot of other deliverables, and we'll talk about all that in a second. So before I get started, any questions about, we'll go through phase by phase. Okay, so Design Essentials is the first phase, that's weeks 1 through 6, and that's really learning the fundamentals of all the tracks that we offer, UX and UI, plus interaction design and information architecture. These are just a sampling of all the things that you learn here. And a lot of these are done week by week, just, you know, this is not mapped to anything in particular, but this is just a whole lot of stuff that you learn here. And you're in the basics of these. You learn enough to understand what it takes to put a process together across a lot of these different areas. And you start to learn which ones of these you're drawn to, because one of the big things about Design Essentials is picking which track you eventually spend the rest of your time in the program doing. So some of these will be UX, some of these will be UI, and some other things. This is basically the structure of this week by week. So it builds starting from UX Essentials. We talk about research. We talk about putting the research together into the beginnings of design process, into interaction design. We build that into visual design principles. We build that into creating high fidelity deliverables in UI design. And then we test all those materials and understand how to improve those step by step in the final week of that space. So you do things like create a competitive analysis where you're looking at a whole bunch of competitors here and trying to understand each one, the pluses and minuses of them, what they're doing well and what they're doing poorly. You create things like a user persona where you're understanding a particular user you want to design for and coming up with all kinds of information that's going to explain how they're going to use that thing that you're creating for them. And application maps where you really map out how a particular person goes through an entire site or an entire app, all the choices they have in front of them, how they use navigation. These are things that you inherently know a lot about already. You understand all of this if this is going through a particular app that you already use, but it's mapping these and starting to come up with all the details about them that can be very valuable to understand where you need to put your time and energy. And it's taking all that information and creating wireframes, taking the basic understanding of what this app or this product needs to do and creating something that mimics that in very, very rough ways. And it's going further into the visual design, creating a style tile where you're starting to figure out the visual versions of these, all these features. So what will it look like? How will you use photography and color and fonts and all these other patterns and elements that you've been learning about? And you put them all together into high fidelity screens where these are as completely designed as possible with the color palette you want and the typefaces that you want and all the patterns in place or all the navigations to be able to come up with something final like this. Design, every phase of the program has pluses and minuses, and it's really important that we don't sugarcoat some of the challenges that come in each of these phases because, again, this is difficult. These are challenging phases. We hope that the challenges are overcome by your process of learning and growing and the pluses that come with that, but we have to talk about it. So in Design Essentials, you experience some challenges like your performance as a qualitatively seen as a designer is more important than the things you create. You will design things that have check marks and have a checklist of things you have to do, but really the quality is looked at. The quality is an important part of that. How you show you grasp the concepts can be very challenging to do, and the feedback you get will be more qualitative than quantitative. You get, remember that list of all the things that we talk about in Design Essentials, that is potentially overwhelming. And hopefully it's not given to you and just dumped in your lap like it's crazy, but it will occasionally be overwhelming. And it may be something that you have to be able to parse that information and learn it at a pace that's going to be uncomfortable for you. but that's the way it is because that's the amount of information we know we need to give you in order to move on to the next phase. There are also challenges of working remotely. As anybody who's ever had a call that got dropped or is on a Hangout or a Zoom or something where there was the Wi-Fi went out, sometimes that happens. And when you speak with people who live in a different country or different city or time zone than you have to be able to work well with them. On the plus side, some really important things that especially people who maybe haven't ever been designers before get to experience for the first time. And those are things like regular feedback on projects from the creative director, from our TAs and graders who work with the creative director there. The skills that you learn in Design Essentials will be useful forever. Those are not just design tools, but ways to start practicing and building processes and learning how to learn, basically. And then you get the opportunity to revisit your work, especially in that week 6, where you do stuff, and then you're able to go back and revisit it and say, based on what I've learned in subsequent weeks, how can I improve this? You get a chance to be able to do that. And that's awesome. You're able to revisit your work and make improvements there and make sure that where you leave it is in the best possible shape you can imagine. So we believe that at the end of Design Essentials, this serves as sort of a taster. Design Essentials is about 15 to 20 hours a week of a commitment. People can work full-time jobs very easily when they're going through Design Essentials. And we believe at the end of this phase, at the end of that 6 weeks, you've gone through all the basics of UX and UI, and you feel ready to learn more. You're curious to go deeper. So when you signed up for the program, you signed up for that escalating growth of the experience. So it starts out as 15 to 20 hours in DE, but it gets more like a full-time job in the next phase, and it gets really, really more than full-time after that. So at the end of this phase, we believe that the majority of people who come through it are ready to go deeper. They're ready to go more full-time. They're ready to put more hours into this and learn a lot more of the deeper levels of practicing design and learning these tools. Any questions about Design Essentials? Anybody else? Okay. So virtual phase is the next phase up. It's the next 6 weeks of the program. And again, this is where people really go deeper. So instead of practicing getting a little bit of experience into various pieces of software and tools, it's really about becoming more proficient. So there's a lot of things that you'll learn in the virtual phase, but a lot of it is just going back to the beginning of that design process that you learned in DE and doing it again, doing it better, doing it more efficiently, going deeper into whatever skills you want to practice. So you learn a bunch of these new things here in many, many different ways, but it really is about, you've already had the base of that. You're building on top of the base of that knowledge. So when you go through all that process again, you build the other products and the other deliverables. Sometimes that's your second time going through them, and you know how to do it. You know a lot about how to do it. You can go deeper, and you can be more effective and more efficient in what you're working on. So this is in this phase. This is the first time where people separate into tracks. There's the UX track and the UI track. UX track really focuses on these particular areas. So you do research in that first week. You take the research and you synthesize it. You come up with a strategy for where you want to take that to start designing. In week 9, you start to look at the information architecture and the interaction design. So you're starting to build, you're starting to create things, you're starting to put all those pieces together to create that product you need to create. In week 10, you're creating those wireframes and the prototypes. So you're building the final versions of these things, what they're going to look like and how they're going to function together, how screens are going to work together, and how the experience of going through that product in general is going to work for users. In the 11th week, you're able to go back and evaluate the work. You're able to test it. You're able to review it and be able to say, here's where changes need to happen. So in the final week of the UX track, you iterate and you refine. So you're able to go back to your work, improve it as much as possible. You're able to test it, and you actually present it to a panel of guest critics at the end of the phase. So on the UX track side, you create a lot of those other deliverables from DE, but you go deeper into task flow, where you really start to understand how somebody is going to go through this particular product step by step in greater detail about the interactions. You create a journey map, which is an understanding of how a particular user is going to go through that product step by step. They're the things that they go through in a particular day, their high points and low points, and where they need this product most. You also create things like a user flow, where you go through very particular steps again and understand going from the beginning to the end about how this thing needs to work. You create a paper prototype. These are drawn on paper, on graded paper. And then you're able to take these into a particular software and turn it into a clickable prototype. So imagine sketching out what a phone screen looks like, scanning it into your phone, and actually being able to use it like a phone screen, where you can tap each of these blue boxes and be able to work through each of these screens and understand exactly what needs to happen step by step. And you can give these to people and say, imagine using this as a real product. How are you going to go through these things, and where can you give me feedback on how to make it better? So there's your low fidelity wireframe, so bringing everything onto the computer, and just in the very basic sense of laying these things out, understanding how they need to function together. This is not pretty by any means, so it's really about the functionality, any interactions, and then worrying about the design part later. Evaluating your product, evaluating other products, and realizing on some very, very universal elements how your particular product works well or poorly, and how it tests, and where you can make pretty specific recommendations to improve your work. It's creating high fidelity wireframes, so understanding every element of what a screen needs to do and how it works together, and being able to explain that in very great detail. On the right here, you can see annotations where you're coming up with explanations for every single element of these screens and being able to explain them to somebody else. On the UI side, the UI folks work in parallel to the UX track, but they work very separately. The UI side in the first week gets the principles of visual design. Then they talk about branding. They start to build visual elements together, talk about interaction design. We talk about mobile and web, so designing for phones and designing for screens of various sizes, designing for laptops and desktops, and then also talking about communicating through design through all the elements and all the other patterns that you've been learning throughout those 6 weeks. So on the UI side, there's a ton of sketching, and these are similar to the paper prototypes, just getting the basic ideas on the paper, figuring out how things are going to work together. No need to make this pretty, just getting it on paper to understand the basics here. Coming up with logo concepts and exploring colors and exploring fonts and other things. Coming up with style tiles, where you're looking at all of the visual elements that need to happen in this app or this screen, and coming up with how they work together and the ideas and the concepts you want to convey within them. And coming up with marketing sites in addition to mobile screens. Like these, a bunch of key screens where you're designing the big steps through this particular app and understanding the big places where people need to pay attention. You need to get the user to do something very specific and understand how they work through all these screens. And afterward, coming up with a style guide where you're breaking down all the elements into colors, into patterns, into other elements and fonts, and explaining how they need to work together and how they need to work individually, so that in case a developer or somebody were ever to take this, they could build a new version of these things step by step through everything you've created. So some challenges in the virtual phase that we don't want to gloss over. Designation becomes a full-time job at this point. In the virtual phase, it's about a 40 to 50 hour week commitment. We've seen people really struggle to balance the virtual phase with having a full-time job. So we really encourage people to go down to a part-time job with this, or stop working altogether if they can, to be able to focus pretty heavily on not just the learning and the communication, but everything that is involved with working in teams, communicating with your TA and with your creative director to understand everything possible about that phase. That means that individual accountability, when you're working together as a team, everybody has to be an individual coming up there, coming together as a team. But that means showing up on time. It means working your tail off. It means pulling the team with you to make sure that everybody is communicating and collaborating effectively. And when somebody drops the ball in your team, it really affects the rest of the team. And it can actually affect their performance going through the rest of the program. So we need people to be individually accountable to themselves and to their teams and to their track and to their creative director and to really the rest of the program that lies in front of them. And because everybody's working together as a team and everybody's virtual, the chances of you working in the same town with your teammates is pretty low. So people have to use things like Google Hangouts and Slack and email and phone calls and video chats and everything else. And those are still the challenges that remain with using technology. So we need people to work with them and be able to understand those tools, and they can be really effective. Because of the virtual phase, the way the virtual phase is structured in the way that it's very team-based, we call this team-based design. It means There's nothing special about it, but it means really being part of a team at all times. And this is where you really get into working together very, very closely with the team, communicating on a minute-by-minute basis, and understanding that you're all moving forward on the same path. You have to get on the same page about the product that you're creating. There's a lot of scheduled check-ins with instructors and with TAs, not just the classes that we have where they're teaching something very specific, but lots of review periods, lots of opportunities for one-on-ones. So you can really speak very closely with them and get very, very tailored feedback to the work you're doing. And there's a final presentation of work to a panel of professionals. They come in and really speak very clearly about what's working well with your work, where your challenges lie, and what you need to focus on the next phase. So, at the end of the virtual phase, you've had a pretty impactful experience. This is again, a full-time or almost full-time experience where you're really focusing very intensely on learning a lot of this information and being present and growing a whole lot. But we believe at the end of the virtual phase, people are ready for that in-person immersive experience. It is challenging to be virtual, to be remote with everybody that is on your team and everybody from your track. We believe people are excited to come together and work together in person here at WeWork. So this is what people feel like when they finish this phase. They're excited to keep learning, they're excited to keep growing, but they're ready to do it in this environment where they can be present with everybody else in person. Any questions about the virtual phase? Okay. Let's talk about the immersion phase, and I may turn things over to Doug here throughout because he is the expert at creating this curriculum and being able to speak about it. The immersion phase is the first 5 weeks of the in-person phases here, again, held at our space in the workroom over there here at WeWork. But it's really taking the experience that you've had, the knowledge that you've gained, those first 2 virtual phases, and turning it into expertise. And here is where we really add a lot of those soft skills, layer in a lot of those soft skills into this work. So it's not just about learning more tools and skills, but it's about deepening your process with all the things that are a part of the experience of being a designer. So we have a lot of these elements in here, journaling, team contracts, information about group presentations, information about creative thinking, and giving and receiving facilitated or personal feedback and presentation prep. Lots of experiences that we talk about here in the immersion phase as being so important to the designer experience also. Doug, do you have anything to mention along these lines?
Oh boy. We had we have no microphone. So yeah, I was going to say the hard and soft skills. We just went through a workshop just today to talk about what's a hard skill, what's a soft skill. And this is, a big, you can pretty much define a hard skill as I'm going to learn Sketch, I'm going to learn some sort of software program. Soft skills are presentations, which we're going to do a lot of in Immersion. And the consensus is very much that hard skills and soft skills have to go together. None of the UI designers are using tools without making a ton of decisions like every hour. None of the UX designers are doing exactly the same too. We may be, we might be going into synthesis exercises as well too. The communication in the teams is as essential as actually making the thing. So there's a lot of, it's kind of a big mixing pot in terms of soft skills and hard skills, but ultimately Immersion is a place where you learn the soft skills, which gets you to the point where you're, where employers are looking for these skills. You have to be able to work within a team, you have to be able to communicate effectively, and you have to be able to present really well. There's at least 4 points where teams are going to be presenting, and they'll be really elevating their process. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're not just talking about making the stuff. You'll see, app maps and UI kits and things like that too. That's not nearly as important as designers who can actually describe their process. I would say, as a creative professional, and I've been in this business for a long time, the best thing is a designer who's actually able to speak to what they do. I'm not necessarily saying it's a selling moment, but it's the elevation of an individual's worth because they're actually able to speak about these things. And that's reflection, that's journaling, that's a lot of practices that we have here. And it makes you stand up in the crowd. 90% of the designers, 90% of the designers that I ever looked at portfolios about, there was less insight in their portfolios and more like, this is the thing I'm making. And that doesn't fly. That doesn't fly with recruiters, and it doesn't fly with me as a hiring manager. So I think we are actually teaching to, we're instructing to a level of design which gets you guys to a point where you stand out a bit more. And that is through soft skills. That's through you guys being able to speak to the work that you do. So there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of talking amongst yourselves. And there's a lot of talking with us. There's a lot of feedback. The feedback that you get is going to be the best feedback you're going to receive. Because most of the time, creative directors and art directors, they don't have the time to give you honest feedback. Usually it's kind of like with an end to getting it done. Sometimes as, you know, within a certain time frame. In professional organizations, you know, here we're actually trying to get you to the best possible product. And you guys have got to, you get honest feedback. We don't pull punches. In the virtual, no one is telling you, no one's sugarcoating. No one's giving you shortcuts. No one's making it easy for you. So you should be prepared to hear it. But we teach you how to take it. We teach you how to listen to that feedback. And none of it is personal. It's all for your improvement. It's all for you guys getting better. Because, you know what, we're not going to waste your time here. We're not going to waste your time with feedback that is kind of, that's candy coating it, or it's not going to lead to your results. We want to make sure you're hearing the message, and we want to make sure you're actually getting some actionable feedback, which, again, professional career aside, I get it not very often. I didn't used to get it very often. So it's kind of it's a pleasure of mine to be able to give to you guys. It's also a pleasure of mine to help instruct you guys to give to each other, which is part of that whole kind of environment that we build around here. So, okay.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just wanted to show a few other of the deliverables that pretty much everybody creates while they're in the immersion phase. A lot of whiteboarding. Again, this is very, very messy. It's about getting the idea down, the concept down, and being able to refine it later on. Creating, this is another example of a second or third journey map that somebody's created. They're getting better, they're getting smarter, they're getting more reflective about this information, and they're able to do it more effectively and more efficiently. And creating another paper prototype that might be even nicer, that might be even more detailed than the ones they used to do in previous phases. And creating more wireframes. These are low fidelity, mid fidelity wireframes. Again, similar deliverables from previous phases, but they're able to do them faster, and they're able to get even better feedback on what they were doing before. And on the UI side, creating mood boards, things that will give that visual representation of just the basics of what should this thing look like and how should it feel. And more style tiles, we're exploring a lot of different design elements here. And creating a UI kit, where you're taking all the individual pieces that have been very well defined and putting them together in new ways and building the system of what a developer needs to know based on what you've created here as a designer. And creating an interactive prototype, and this is my favorite animated GIF because boop, just has a nice little boop. I could do that all day. And creating a design system where you're exploring every screen imaginable for this product and how they all need to work together, function together, and follow the color palette and the other design elements that you've built over the course of several weeks. This is not something you can do in a day. This is something that takes weeks to build, just from the basic research and the basic conceptual nuggets and building upon that over and over again, step by step, so you get to this final piece. So by the end of those 5 weeks, you are ready to build something like this, especially UI designers. They're ready to do this. It comes naturally at this point because it's really been built step by step. So a few challenges for the immersion phase. This is the first in-person phase. For people who aren't in Chicago and they have to come to Chicago, there are a lot of challenges, especially, as we all know, between November and March of April. Okay, yeah, April. Of every year. It's really challenging to live in Chicago, and it can be challenging to come to this space every day and deal with the commute, deal with the patterns that need to be built to be able to come in and do that. Similar to the way you would do if you moved to a new city or started a new job or did something else. You have to build those patterns successfully. Team communication is so important here, and it's not just the individual accountability from previous phases, but it's now the team lives and dies together. The team fails dramatically and succeeds wildly together. And you need to communicate very effectively, very successfully at all times, so that your team understands who you are, where you are in your career, what you're getting out of this particular experience, where your challenges are, what made you happy or what made you sad yesterday and today, the challenges you face and the successes you face, you do that all together. So we have to see teams communicate, collaborate, really work together all the time, because that is how we know professional designers succeed, is they succeed or fail as part of a team. And again, these phases, these in-person phases are 70 or 80 hours a week. And that's a lot. We know that's a lot. And there's just a rigor about coming in before 10 a.m. every day and leaving at 9 p.m. every day and working on Saturdays and taking a lunch break whenever you can. It's not going to be scheduled for you. Taking a dinner break whenever you can. There's a lot of acclimation that has to happen to that people have to accommodate while they're also learning and building and growing and just designing. So that's a big challenge, but it's one that if you did that with DE, incorporating DE, the experiences of DE into your regular life and the experiences of virtual into your regular life, you are prepared for that escalation, we believe. Some really great things that happen in the immersion phase. You get so much experience in user testing and interviews, like hours and hours worth, right? So many people that you meet, so many ways to test your work in many different ways.
With clients too, it's really important to know that both in the immersion and the client phase, you guys are going to be working with people that are real. I think that's a really important part of the UX process. So the users you're speaking to, you have a stake in this. In some cases, the research that you do is going to affect outcomes for people. So you guys care about this, and we'll teach you to care about this stuff. It's good work, and for we frequently do nonprofit community organizations or people that are starting up businesses that have a social good component, because that's who we are too. We like to work with organizations that are good people. And that's who we produce as well too. It's people that care about ethics, people that care about producing quality work. So yeah.
So our current clients are the Chicago Design Museum and WeWork.
Yep.
We've done the Chicago Public Library.
Yep.
We've done AIJ Chicago.
Yep.
We've done Project Adoptable, which was a dog adoption
We did.
nonprofit.
Yep.
And Invest Africa.
Yes.
Which was about micro loans.
No, it's
financing.
Volunteers.
It's volunteering
That's
between people in like people would. There was interview opportunities with partner organizations in Lagos, Nigeria. There's a lot of opportunity to speak to a lot of academics and people in the Chicago area that we're trying to partner with them as well too. So you're not, we're trying to get you out of designing for yourselves. We're trying to get you out of designing for your own cohort and people that you know. Other programs might sort of give you that leeway, but we try to give you guys users and experiences that make for amazing case studies and good experiences for you guys here. Because we think that's the best way to learn. If you're going to empathize with people, you need to empathize with people that are different than you are, because that gives you a broader range in terms of your design experience, and it stretches you in ways that you guys don't know about yet. So yeah.
I think the teams who did Invest Africa had to come in at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. because the time difference was so huge that was the only, it was mid-afternoon for the people they were interviewing in Africa. You just have to, that's something you have to roll with as a designer here. So we try not to make a 6 a.m. Interview time a thing that happens every time, but occasionally it does.
Yep.
And it can produce some pretty amazing results.
Yeah. I didn't hear any complaints. Like, I don't think anybody called Nigeria and had a chance to speak to people who are dealing with some pretty important issues. I didn't hear a peep out of any of the groups saying, "Oh man, that was too hard." It wasn't too hard because it was really great. Like when they had these conversations with people, they're trying to solve their problems. So there's a real impetus to make something happen. And that's your life as a designer in the future. That's who we are hoping you guys are gonna reach out to in your careers.
Another really great thing that happens in this phase is it builds to a final presentation that you give as a team to a panel of guest critics. These are professional product designers, UX, UI designers from companies around Chicago. But that's not the only time you're presenting. In a weekly sprint presentation environment, you're presenting your work for half an hour every week, and you're getting feedback for like an hour, hour and a half every single week. So you're prepared to build that presentation step by step. You're prepared to be able to explain your decisions step by step, week by week, and be able to build to that final presentation where it's not terrifying, well, maybe, but it's less terrifying, or hopefully so. And getting that feedback at every stage is so important to be able to go back and keep revising, making it the best it could possibly be every single week. That's something that we've been extremely fortunate to have as part of our curriculum.
We iterate, we ask you guys, we iterate through all those presentations. You guys are going to all emerge from here as amazing presenters for the most part. I think Mike actually said it too. He said that we graduate designers who are amazing presenters. To the point where sometimes we get some recent graduates who walk into UX forums or meetup groups and they do a presentation and, where did that come from? It came from people being able to explain their process and their working styles in ways that a lot of people don't, that some other people take for granted. We try to elevate that learning of your own process through journaling and all those other techniques that we've developed over many years, so that you guys are you're way more thoughtful and articulate when it comes to actually speaking about them, because that's going to, like Mike said, these are skills that will give you, it'll be in good stead for the rest of your career. Regardless of where you go, you guys are going to have skills that are going to be, they're going to set you apart.
So we believe that at the end of this immersion phase, everybody who goes through the program is able to stop and look back at where they've gone in the last 17 weeks. And you're able to see your growth because you've done these presentations week by week in this phase. You've learned a lot of the soft skills surrounding the hard skills of being a professional designer. And you've been a teammate in many different ways and a designer for clients in several different ways. And you're able to see your growth as a lot of things. And that's really valuable to be able to stop at the end of this phase and see it and go, I'm ready for more. I can handle just about anything. Does anybody have any questions about the immersion phase? Well, that's okay.
Just time afterwards too. I'll stick around.
Yeah, Doug is fantastic. Thank you. All right, client phase, and I would love to also have Megan and/or Dan chime in here at a certain point. But the client phase is one of the pretty amazing parts of this program that even from day one, very first iteration of designation, we said we have to design for clients. There are a lot of programs out there like designation, a lot of our competitors and people who call themselves design boot camps, where they don't offer you any real client work. They may offer you a project that says Facebook or Apple or Uber or Tesla has asked us to create this amazing, beautiful product, and it's going to work wonders, it's going to be amazing, but it's not real. And that is a very challenging thing to experience because the work remains, the concepts remain abstract. They remain a little bit less real. And so we said, okay, you've gone through this experience of the immersion phase. You're designing for this nonprofit client. You're designing this product that's going to benefit a lot of people. Now you're really going to do it for an organization where they are a real startup. They're a real product company. You're a real founder of this startup or these companies. They've invested money and time and their team and a competitive advantage and lots of things into this relationship of you being their designer, you being their design team. So there's a lot on the line here, but it means you're actually looking at how your design process and everything you know can be used in the real world, can be used for real problems, for real business stakeholders in real situations. We're learning a little bit more here, a little bit more on the edges of the real design process. At this point, the vast majority of things you already know how to do. The majority of that design process you practiced over and over again. But now when you're doing this for this external client, this external evaluator, I guess, it's really, you know how to do it. It's more instinctive, it's easier, you can do it more efficiently, and you have to because you got 4 weeks to do this project instead of 6 or 5. Do you have anything to mention about Confidence?
I think, so hopefully you guys can appreciate from what Mike has talked about so far, how much our program is set up to build from one phase to another. And the client phase is where, really kind of, I think we've characterized it as like the summit of the experience sometimes. This is many ways what you've been building up to at this point. And each step along the way, we remove some of the scaffolding, but we also layer on new challenges. And in the client projects, some of those challenges are, communication is a through line for the experience of designation. Learning how to better communicate your design ideas, your decisions, the point of view that you have come up with. We add into the mix now someone who is potentially, doesn't have experience with design, coming from an entirely different angle on it. And the challenge for you is to communicate and have a design conversation with stakeholders on the client team who maybe don't share that language with. It's also an extra challenge because up to this point, you've been pushed and pushed and pushed to be advocates for users' needs, advocates for the pain points that users experience, the problems that products can help solve for them. Now we layer on this whole kind of sometimes contrary pressure of business requirements, business needs, business constraints. And the challenge, and really a lot of what the work of being a designer is finding that balance, finding a way to solve for both a user need and a business problem. And then also your personal process. By this point in the program, you've gone through the loop on the design process so many times. Starting in Design Essentials, we have a fairly clear kind of format and process for you. You learn that, layer on the next phase, layer on the next phase, iterate, repeat, learn more things about yourself. And by this point, you guys are also expected to be able to take ownership over that. So there's no one true design process. There really is what works for me now, me personally as a designer, my team as a design team, for this product that we're working on, for the insights that we got from our research and our testing, and for this client in this particular situation. We've given you a big tool set to this point, and now at this point, you're expected to be capable of picking and choosing what tool to use when.
So a few things that, just images from things that client-based designers have done. Identity diagramming, again, taking all the data from these different post-its, from these interviews and everything, collecting them and finding the patterns, finding the things that are going to be most important for them to design for later on. Creating a user persona that has real needs here because it's based on that real information they collected. Creating design principles where these are the guidelines that take you from the research stage and the ideation stage and the brainstorming stage into the design stage and saying, what we create from this point forward, we'll have to follow these principles because these are built with the user in mind, with the client in mind, with that problem and that product in mind. And creating high fidelity wireframes where you're really designing these for the benefit of the client, where they can easily understand what a red box means, what a green box means, what these different message alerts mean, and being able to explain this in a way that is going to be most effective for them to understand why you did all these things in the first place. And creating a prototype that's really going to work very well together, and all these buttons might be tappable and it might animate in really clear ways so that you can truly explain to the client why you did these things for them, what purpose they solve. And creating style tiles on the UI side, and creating UI kits. Again, these are very similar to what we showed in earlier phases. Creating key screens, creating style guides where you're looking at all the individual pieces, pixel by pixel, of how something needs to be built together. So many other deliverables that come up in the client phase that we just don't have time to show you. A few challenges that come up in the client phase that, again, we feel compelled to be able to mention right now. Again, it's a 4-week phase. You're doing the same amount of work as a UX or UI designer that you had 6 weeks to do earlier on in the virtual phase. You had 5 weeks to do in the immersion phase. So you have a greater number of deliverables, most likely, and less time to do it. It means you have to find ways to work more effectively and more efficiently with your team and with yourself in your own process. You do have the pressures of working for real clients, and sometimes they are complex. They may go to China for a week and not be communicative. They may change the entire structure of their business while you're working on it with them in those 4 weeks. There's all kinds of other crazy stories sometimes, or things that that are unforeseen. And as a designer who needs to pivot, this is the place where that is most clearly seen, where that must be practiced. You must be ready for the client to do or say anything. And as Dan mentioned, sometimes you are the first designer they've ever encountered, where you actually have the knowledge and the skills to be able to build something that is intelligent and functional and works toe-to-toe against the competitors they're trying to beat. So to be able to explain that and be able to get them to understand that, that can be very challenging. But it's an amazing challenge when you can get past that and be able to like overcome that. A lot of these products, again, this may be the first time that they're thinking about design. They may have an MVP, a minimum viable product. They may have just a sketch or an idea of something, and you're creating, you're fleshing it out. And you're taking the things you've learned and things you've done and actually giving them, applying them to products and these projects that really need expert designers. They need conscientious, thoughtful, skilled designers who really give them everything and so many hours per week. And you make weekly presentations directly to the client. So there's the kickoff, there's a couple of check-ins in between where you're presenting the work in progress, there's the final presentation. And it's great to be able to present your work to that panel of guest critics in the immersion phase, but here you're presenting your work to clients. It's an interesting challenge because they don't understand what a paper prototype is. They don't understand what a UI kit is. They really understand why you created these things for them, why you made these decisions, because you're keeping that client and their needs in mind. When you can incorporate that into your presentations, it is an awesome tool you can take with you for the rest of your career. And there's a really good likelihood that because they come to designation asking for design help, asking for a team that they can work with closely, they're going to put money into this. They want to develop it. They want to publish it. They want to have it be an app or a site or something that lives on out there. And that is an awfully exciting thing to be able to see your work out there in the world. If it's not in the total form that you created, but it's in a partial form, it's so exciting as a professional designer to see that thing you had a hand in creating. And we love it when we give people the chance to experience that during the program, after the program, in some other form. Anything to add on these fronts? Great. All right. So at the end of the client phase, you're reaching the end of the program here. We believe that because people have these experiences in working directly with clients, they're able to apply their skills in any direction. Once you have that experience of presenting to a client and designing for them in dealing with the real problems, the real situations they give to you, you can apply your skills to just about any situation out there. And that's super empowering. You know that because the program is ending pretty soon, that you're going to have the opportunity to do this as a professional. And it's great to be able to go from kind of looking back or living at the moment of learning and having to ideate and change on a daily basis to actually looking forward beyond the program and saying, here's what my life is going to look like as a professional designer. I can see it, I can picture it. And that's really great. Any questions on the client phase? We have had, how many, you added up our clients, how many clients have we had?
We've done, since 2014, 311 separate client projects with, I think, 191 clients and 199 products.
There you go, 199 products. These are just some of that list. A lot of these you have probably never heard of because they're startups. They're 1, 2, 4, 5 people who are working really closely and working hard to get their product online. Some of these you have heard of because they're pretty well known. And we've been fortunate to work with clients that are bigger or have a lot of products out there. But for the most part, you're at the beginning of their lifespan as a product, as an organization. And it's really great to be able to figure out the direction of that product, to build it with them, and to be trusted as that partner who says, I know how to design for you. I know how to build this thing for you. And we're going to make this thing something you can be very proud of.
We have a live question.
Oh, sure.
How much choice do the students have in terms of choosing groups to work with or clients to work with in the client phase?
Yes, so our designers, and I would love to have Megan or Dan expand upon this if I miss any information, but our teams are built by creative directors in every phase. So in the virtual phase, they're built by that creative director. The immersion phase, they're built. The client phase, they're built. And they're built to try to be as impactful as possible. So if we see one person who's going to the program who is a big introvert and they need to be challenged to present more comfortably and work more collaboratively with people, they're going to be paired with somebody who's probably a big extrovert, and they can help each other grow together. So we are as thoughtful and purposeful as possible in trying to get our teams built so that they can impact each other, they can be as productive as possible, and they can grow in areas that may need that growth. We have a lot of information about every designer who comes through the program, about their background, what they're interested in, the areas of design they might have experience in. And we try to match that experience and that interest with clients when we can. So, in the past, we've had people who came from a healthcare background doing something for a healthcare tech product, or somebody from finance being able to generally work in that same area. But also, it can be a really great experience to work for a client or an industry you have no experience in. To be able to understand how to do that deep dive initially, how to research them, and how to start to build up working knowledge very, very quickly of that industry, of that client. And when you can do that, it shows off really remarkable ways of learning and being able to implement information very effectively. Anything to add on this? Yeah. Any other questions at this point? Anyone from the folks in the room? Yep, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have many students come into the program after doing kind of a self-study period or any pre-work on their own? Are they more successful throughout the course?
So the question there for the virtual folks is, does anybody come into the program having done any sort of self-study or any sort of course of study beforehand, and does that translate to greater success? The answer is yes, and most likely. Yes, we really love having people. There's usually a great span of time between when you find out about a program like ours and you apply and you get accepted and your cohort begins. We're talking weeks, sometimes months. We give anybody who asks a reading list of books. We have a lot of websites and articles that we recommend people read. There are tools that people can explore on their own. And we do believe that any exposure that you get to those tools of learning are going to just make you, when you can do that on your own, it can show a sense of being ready to tackle harder, more difficult things later on your own as needed. And you just build more working knowledge of what's happening. So we can't guarantee that information is going to be directly applicable to your time here, but generally speaking, it will. And the more you can understand about how UX and UI concepts work in the real world and translate from these sort of book definitions to products that are out there and methodologies and thought leadership and other things, the more prepared you are. We believe the more prepared you are for this program. Yeah. So that reading list, I don't know how many hundreds of times you've given out that reading list probably by now, but really saying here are a bunch of books, here are a bunch of resources that we strongly recommend you look at because they are universally applicable to your experience in the program. Any other questions at the moment? Awesome. So just wanted to mention here a few of the clients that we work with. We work with early stage MVPs that are looking for to define their product. We work with live products that need refinements, that maybe need a real design eye to be able to function much more appropriately. They maybe need testing to make sure that the decisions that have been made are really effective. And we look at existing products that want to expand their functionality. So maybe a product is a B2C tool right now, and they're looking for a B2B version, and we'll build that B2B version. Or they exist as a website, and they want to build an app, and we will be responsible for that app. If there's anybody in the room who knows anybody, or you yourself have a product and you're interested in working with Designation as your design team, you can go to designation.io/RFP, and there's a form there to fill out to become a client. Please feel free to pass this along to anybody who might want to work for us or work with us as a free service. The clients, we love doing that. We just love being able to provide a realistic experience for our designers. Finally, the last phase of the program, the career phase, and this is the final 3 weeks, weeks 22 to 24. The purpose of the career phase, again, as we said, is to change from the act of being a designer to telling the story of growth as a designer. You've set goals for yourself, whether or not you know it, at the beginning of your experience designation. And as you go through the program, you have refined or added to or changed those goals about where you see yourself going as a designer. And those are your goals individually. Everyone who goes through this program has a different idea of where they're going in the future, what kind of design they want to practice, what city they want to live in, what size team they want to work with, how many, the problems they want to solve as a designer. So everybody has a very individual way that they're going to go about getting there, and that requires communication, requires very effective communication in a lot of different ways. So these are different things that people learn in the career phase: building a portfolio site, writing case studies and designing case studies, and designing a resume, using LinkedIn very effectively to network for jobs, and writing cover letters. And any experience that anybody has had in doing these in the past for non-design jobs or design jobs absolutely comes in handy here, but there's a whole lot about doing these things to get a UX or UI job that we focus very intensely on for those 3 weeks. So people will write case studies, and they will do a lot of taking photos of themselves, pointing at a wall of Post-its, because this is how they're able to explain that they take all this data and synthesize it, come up with a product that needs to be created from it. And they'll write about their insights and talk about what they did as a result of a particular step or creating a deliverable. And they'll talk about the evolution of the things they created, from the paper prototype to the mid-fidelity wireframe to the high-fidelity screens of the final version. And they'll show the screens they create, show the things that they did in more dynamic ways to get people to be engaged with them. And they'll create portfolio sites, and they'll create a bunch of different resumes that look so different from each other, that express so many different ideas from each other, that are so individual. And in the career phase, the career phase has a bunch of different challenges that are distinct to the career phase. Number one, this is where designation as communication is much more clear than the other phases. There's so much about writing and communicating and presenting that is the big focus in the career phase. That's not necessarily as big a focus in previous phases. And that shift requires a big pivot for every designer in the program. This is the phase that moves the fastest. It requires a lot of work in 3 weeks, and a lot of new work, different work, that must be done very quickly. But it's done to really get you prepared for life after the program. And this is where, again, everybody has a different goal for themselves of where they want to go after the program. That means everybody has expectations. Sometimes those are very, very high. And when that happens, people must work and must produce this work that is as high a quality of work as what their expectations do. So if you want to work for Apple or Facebook or Uber or IDEO or some other organization, you have to produce at that level. And you are responsible for doing that. Only you can do that really effectively. We have a ton of supplemental activities that happen in the career phase, like studio tours and panels of hiring managers and alums, and mock interviews, and a bunch of other things that give you a lot of perspectives about the types of jobs you might be considering, insight into what those are going to be like in reality. Again, your past professional experiences, so people who have been teachers and lawyers and artists and any type of professional background, those experiences play a big, big role here. Especially people who've done like customer service. If you've been a barista or a bartender for years, that is a big deal, because you know how to talk to strangers. You know how to deliver something and have customer service as a big value for yourself. That's a gigantic part of becoming a professional designer. And the things you create in the career phase, your case studies, your resume, your portfolio site, other things, you can use those in some form for decades to come. You will never have to learn how to write a different kind of resume for the rest of your life. You will never have to learn how to write a different kind of case study for the rest of your life. That knowledge is effective forever. And it comes in really handy because we know there will be a second job, months or years or decades later, and a third job and a fourth job. And you can always use the tools and the workshop decks and the PDFs and everything else you did in the career phase for the rest, as long as PDFs exist, basically, you can continue to do that. So we believe that by the end of the career phase, you have built your skills little by little, and you've built this experience little by little and phase by phase. At the end of the career phase, you are ready for that lifetime of learning. You've done this in so many different ways to prepare yourself for it, that's what the rest of your life will be like. And we hear a lot from people who come through the program who said, My job as a professional designer is way less intense than my experience as a designation. And we hear from people who say, my life as a professional designer is just as crazy as it was a designation. I'm still working 70, 80 hours a week, but you know what? I'm prepared for it. The people who say I'm only working 40 or 50 hours a week, they say, this is a breeze. We hear from people who say, my boss is just dumbfounded at how fast I'm able to work because designation taught me how to work really, really fast. So by the end of this program, you are prepared for just about anything that can come your way as a professional designer. And we're awfully proud to be able to say that. So a lot of people who, I include this slide, we have hiring partners all over the world, people who have hired designation graduates, sometimes one person, sometimes 10 people or a dozen people, again, all over the world. And you see companies like Apple and Facebook, and you see agencies and consultancies like Capco and Fjord and Slalom all over the world. And some of these companies are in Berlin and London and Toronto, all over the place. And some are very small and some are huge, have thousands and thousands of people. IBM Design, for example. We have seen so many people be in so many different types of environments and jobs after the program that anybody who came through this program said, this was the place I wanted to work at. This was the place I wanted to work at. I was prepared to tell the stories to get me into that environment, to get me to that place that would be as challenging and fulfilling as possible. And that's awesome. And these are the different types of jobs that we prepare people for. Everybody has a different preference. Everybody has a different goal in mind. For an agency or a consultancy, working on an in-house team doing design products at a company that maybe isn't strictly design focused. Or product companies creating digital products that came out of startups. And startups that are very small and they're looking for funding, looking for competitive advantage where you're maybe the sole designer who works there, doing everything you can for that startup. And we have people who are nonstop freelancers or contract designers where they go from job to job, experiencing so many different types of jobs and problems they want to solve because they want to explore. And none of these is better than the others. They're just about where your goal is, where your work is going to take you. And we have a lot of really great features after graduation that come too. We have one-to-one mentorship with career mentors. We have about 150, maybe 160 now, professional designers all over the world who work one-to-one with graduates. And they help them serve as a bridge between this program and their first job. And that relationship can lead to so many great things later on. We have a thriving job board. The jobs are posted daily just for designation alums, where these are people who have personal references and referrals about jobs and jobs that are posted everywhere that we give to everybody in our community. We want people to know how robust the design community is, not just in Chicago, but around the world. We have so many connections with creative recruiters. We have like 24 creative recruiting companies around the world that we work with. So many job boards, a ton of other resources that we give to everybody because we want you to feel prepared to have that lifetime experience of continuing to learn, of getting a job that's going to be just as challenging as your time here. Because of this, all of this, we say that we can't guarantee you a job after graduation. Nobody can. If there's any company who can guarantee you a job after graduation, they are not being truthful. Because so much of finding a job is on you, the designer, you, the worker, you, the person who has learned all these things, and only you know what's going to give you the most challenge and experience afterward. So we can guarantee very, very thoroughly that we'll give you everything you need to be able to get a job yourself. And that's a big difference here. This idea of self-sufficiency, we want people to feel prepared to know that they've earned that job. We don't want to give you that job. We want to give you all the tools you need to earn it yourself. And that's really, really important. We just ran the numbers. 96% of graduates have gotten jobs within 6 months of graduation. That's about 475 of the first 475 graduates, about 96% of them. And here's all the places that they live and have gotten jobs all over the world. So we do have a big community here in Chicago, but we also have great communities of graduates in San Francisco and New York, and a bunch in Toronto, and several in Austin, and a bunch of people now in London, and a couple in Istanbul, and just all over the place here It's really exciting to be able to hear from designers talk about their experiences wherever they live. So it's not just about Chicago. Before we get into some of the specifics, anybody have any questions about the career phase? Questions from Facebook or anything? Nope. Okay. So now let's talk money. A big piece of information that people are very curious about when they come to an info night like this is how much does designation cost? The answer is a total of $15,800. The first payment that you make is a $1,000 deposit, and that secures your place in a cohort and secures your ability to work through Design Essentials. That's the first 6 weeks of the program. That is a great, great deal to be able to get 6 weeks worth of knowledge and skills for just $1,000. After you make it through Design Essentials, you are then on the hook to be able to pay the $14,000 remaining balance of the entire program. And this can be paid in 4 equal installments. It can be paid all at once. We have a bunch of information that we can give you when you apply to the program. Courtney has recited this information in her sleep, so she can give you all that information when you apply, when you download one of our program overviews. A lot of information about how to work it, but it really is this sort of 2 payments of one small and one great payment. So that total cost is $1,500. When you look at competitors to designation, which we consider as a few of them are General Assembly, Startup Institute, Tradecraft, Block, and Center, you see here what this breakdown looks like. So when you look at the duration of the program, you look at the cost per week, you look at the base enrollment, and you look at what the program is in person or remote, you can start to see a bunch of different data pieces here that are going to influence your ability to pick one of these or the others. So think about programs that are really, really short. And think about all the things they only have time to teach you in that program. That is going to be different from the experience of a 24-week, 6-month designation program. And that does impact your ability to think of cost per week, think of how much you'll be paying totally. Look at Center here, which is a 90-week program that costs $60 grand. And we encourage people to do the research on competitors, be able to look at all the programs that are out there, because you may have one that meets your needs to be completely remote or to be able to be in the city that you live in. But we believe that through these data points and everything else we've talked about in before here in the info night, there's a lot of reasons why designation is the best possible value for your investment. To help make that a reality, we work with 3 financing partners, Skills Fund, Climb, and Meritize, where all of these companies were really founded to help bootcamp participants and participants of programs like ours. So they understand that people have come from varying backgrounds. They need to pay a higher amount of money for an educational experience like this, and they are able to offer some really great competitive rates to be able to help you do so, to be able to get loans for the enrollment fees, in some cases loans that can help with living expenses, and be able to offer you some benefits even after the program as you're paying back your loan. Especially Meritize is able to offer that to applicants of loan applicants for Meritize.
Yeah, all 3 offer living expenses in addition to tuition because we're a program wherein you have to quit your job during it. So we encourage people to sort of take that into consideration when applying for all 3 loans.
Information about a couple of upcoming cohorts. We are now looking for folks for the Kiwi and Lilac cohorts. These are the schedules for these upcoming cohorts. Kiwi Design Essential starts on September 10th and goes all the way through March 29th, 2019. So there's a week off for Thanksgiving, several weeks off there in between for the holidays and the new year. Applications for Kiwi are due August 27th. Is that correct? Yeah. So, and then Lilac starts at the end of October. You get a week off for Thanksgiving and then starts up again for the virtual phase January 7th and then runs through May 17th. Applications are due in October for that. So we are accepting, like I said, applications for both these cohorts. We do applications on a rolling basis. So sometimes people will want to apply to the program now and get accepted, and they may be able to apply to actually get into a later cohort. We can only do that for a 6-month period. So that's kind of it. And when you apply to the program and speak with Courtney, you get a lot more information about all this stuff. Admission and designation is not guaranteed. We are not a program that lets everybody in. At the moment, about 75% of applicants are accepted. Would you say that's about accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe lower almost.
A little bit more like 70%?
Yeah.
So there are people that we speak with who primarily don't seem prepared for a program like ours. They don't seem emotionally prepared, mentally prepared, and sometimes they may have trouble understanding that designation is not just about learning a particular tool, but it's about having this immersive experience and being a teammate and an effective communicator and dealing with ambiguity and dealing with communication and a lot of other experiences. This is a complex experience, a complex program. We really encourage people to understand it. So we do encourage doing some research beforehand, maybe doing some reading about UX or UI to make sure that that's a professional area that's going to be very valuable for you. And we want to be able to come speak with you about that and be able to tell you more about it. A few things we look for in applicants. I'm not going to read the list, but you can sort of see here. Some experience in just the soft skills about being able to be prepared for an experience like this. We look for good experience, especially in managing time, because that's really valuable here. You have to work really, really quickly on a lot of things and be able to juggle them effectively and make decisions very quickly and be self-sufficient and definitely in collaboration. And we really need strong experience in people who are self-aware. They're aware of their weaknesses. They're aware of their strengths. They're aware of their opportunities to grow. We need strong experience for people who are motivated to work and they're engaged, and they can be very, very engaged and show that to the people around them, especially their career directors. And we need people who have a lot of experience just giving a shit. That's a big deal here. You have to give a shit about yourself, about the people around you, about the clients you work for, about the audiences you design for, about the products you create, about everything you learn and do. And if you don't give a shit, it can be really hard to sustain the momentum that you need to be able to effectively go through a program like ours and, truthfully, be a professional designer after. So we really like to see these things in people, and there are so many opportunities to grow these experiences, not just in the program, but even before the program. So we encourage people to find opportunities to do so and come talk to us, because we want to see people who have these particular experiences in their background. We have three types of applicants we consider normally. Career starters, and these are people with minimal job or design experience. Career switchers, and these are people who have some to a lot of years of experience working in a profession that's not related to design. We have advancers, career advancers, who maybe are in some form of design or working with designers and they want to switch into digital design. In other words, that looks like this. We have a lot of new college graduates. We have high school graduates. We have service job holders. We also have a lot of people who just have the most random jobs you can imagine. We had an opera singer in there. We had a pastry chef. He almost told his other pastry chef friends to come through designation. We're hoping for like a whole cohort of pastry chefs. And a lot of people who were designers or around designers, so graphic designers, motion designers, art directors, people like architects, industrial designers, where they know the basics of design. And a lot of those basics are universally understood, and they're used in UX or UI also. Any questions about this list, by the way? Anybody see themselves as one of these areas, hopefully? So here, very briefly, are the steps in the application process. So you will fill out an application at designation.io/apply, and that application takes like 3 minutes. It's very quick. That is, it's not the application to be accepted into designation. It's the application to get an interview with the admissions team, Courtney or another person on staff. Everybody who applies to the program gets an interview, period. And that interview can be in person here at WeWork, so you'll be able to see the space again, or it's done through Google Hangout, by phone. Courtney interviews people all over the world every day, so there's no need to, if you're not in Chicago, there's no need to consider that as being a deal breaker. We see 3 kind of outcomes of that interview, and there are a lot of questions that Courtney asks about your past experiences, your experience with teamwork, your experience with resiliency, leading teams and communicating with teams. That is just as important as what do you know about UX, what do you know about UI, and what's your experience in the design. So we see applicants show strong potential for success. We see applicants show some potential for success. We see some applicants who have show very little potential for success. So that means a few different outcomes here. We see people with strong potential, they're accepted into the full program. We send them the paperwork, the contract to join, and then invoice for that $1,000 invoice for Design Essentials, and they're able to pay that invoice and join Design Essentials. We have something called self-paced Design Essentials, which means it's a very similar curriculum to the regular Design Essentials program, but it's able to be done at your own pace, because some people maybe don't have hardly any time they can devote to the program. They maybe want to do it over several months instead of 6 weeks. So they're able to be given access to that curriculum and the chance to learn at their own pace. So they have occasional check-ins with the creative director, but mainly they're working on their own and being able to uncover that information on their own. We may also ask some people who show moderate potential for success to complete a design challenge. And design challenges are actually found in the professional design world all the time. It's a problem that you're asked to solve or address, and not design something perfect, but design something, come up with something that is going to solve the problem we address. And the point of a design challenge is to show that you can demonstrate critical thinking and communication skills, not design experience. So it's intended to be something that anybody can pick up and be able to solve for. So applicants return it within several days, and we evaluate the results of their design challenge or their experiences in self-paced DE. We make the decision whether to accept or deny them. If we see somebody with very low potential for success in the program, we will deny them admission to the full program. We also give them a reading list, and we encourage them to learn more about digital design. Sometimes they don't know anything about UX or UI, and so we want them to do that. Say, take a few months, here's our reading list, learn a bunch, whatever you can learn, and get up to speed on those things so that you can come back. We want you to reapply in 6 months and let us know that you've learned these things, you've picked up this information, you've absorbed it, and you're ready to learn more. So one note about DE is that you have to be accepted to the entire 24-week program in order to do DE. We don't have separate applications and admissions for DE as a program versus the full program. You have to be able to be accepted into the full program in order to do Design Essentials. But we occasionally have people who stop the program after DE. They've said, I just came here to learn the basics of UX and UI, so then I'm finished and I want to go back to my job or take this knowledge and go back to my career. And people can do that, they're welcome to do that. But if they do decide to continue on, they are already admitted to the entire program, they can just keep going as needed. Any questions about that? Yes?
So going back to the slide prior to this, the 3 different stages, if you're accepted into self-paced Design Essentials, how long do you have to complete that before you're evaluated?
So the question for the remote folks, in case anybody didn't hear it, is how long do you have to complete self-paced Design Essentials if you're in that? I believe the answer is kind of indefinitely. We do check-ins to make sure that people are moving through that process, but generally speaking, the folks who do self-paced do so because their life can't really handle a Design Essentials program, so that 20-hour-week commitment. And generally speaking, they don't see that changing in the future. So we want them to be able to do that entire curriculum at the pace they need it to. At the same time, we also obviously encourage people to go from self-paced DE into the rest of the program. So we want to see that change. We want to see them be able to devote more time to it whenever possible.
Okay, and then one more follow-up question. Sure. If you're accepted straight away into the full program, how long do you have to make your deposit process?
Courtney, would you answer that?
A week is what we say typically. It's flexible, especially if you're going to transfer cohorts, but that's typically the expectation.
Yeah. So if you've gone through the interview and you've demonstrated that potential for success, hopefully you're ready to get started. Now, especially with like an upcoming cohort, we know that may be several months in the future, a couple months in the future, but we want to make sure that at that moment where you're excited to work and you've proven that you're ready to do that, you're able to pay that and be able to hold your place in there and then prepare for that experience of getting into the essentials. So 1 week or so is about a good time. Any other questions about this process? Almost done. So a few things we encourage you to do to contact us if you're curious about working with us in some capacity. If you want to learn more about the program and apply, go to designation.io/apply. You can also email Courtney at designation.io. If you are somebody who wants to be a client of designation, or you know somebody who does, you have them email Dan in addition to filling out the RFP form online. And if you know anybody who wants to hire a designation graduate or have offer somebody a contract role or a full-time role, have them email me. My email is josie@designation.io. We are all very happy to speak with anybody here in this room, anybody who's remote, about the opportunities that might exist in the future to work with designation. Also, we strongly encourage people to follow us on social media if you don't already. Facebook.com/designation, Twitter /designation.io, Instagram.com/designation.io. We give a lot of different pieces of information about the designation experience on each of these channels. So Instagram is very visual. We show a lot of photos about what's happening in our community, especially in our workroom. Twitter, we talk a lot about the world of UX and UI. Give a lot of resources, a lot of articles, share a lot of information and things, a lot of points of view and perspectives for people to build their own understanding of what the UX UI world is like. And we also encourage people to hear from graduates directly. So if you'd like to speak with Emily here in person, you're welcome to do so afterward. But coursereport.com, switchup.org, two big sites for information about programs like ours. You hear directly from people who have gone through the program. They talk about the good things, they talk about the challenging parts, they talk about the things that need work and improvement, and the things that are really special about that program. We have 99 reviews of designation at Course Report, I believe 72 at SwitchUp, 71 as of today. Also the designation blog, designation.io/blog, we have dozens and dozens of interviews with graduates who talk about their experiences, especially after the program, getting settled into their first jobs. We encourage you to read all of these and have those help your decision-making process about whether designation is going to be the right program. Now, remember Melvin, who now works at Unit Group in St. Louis. Melvin said, designation has made a significant impact in my life. I've stepped out of so many comfort zones and surprised myself with learning new things at a fast pace. And remember Jane, who's now in Evanston as a UX designer. I rediscovered what it was like to experience joy in work. I expanded my network. I created lasting friendships and had a lot of fun, all while becoming a designer. And Abigail, who's now at Allstate. I knew I'd make connections in the field, but I didn't know I developed such strong relationships with my fellow designers. I'm amazed at the level of support I still get from my cohort. And Tom, from that big picture of all the Nectarine UI graduates. It's an invigorating feeling to be surrounded by so many creative minds with similar ambitions as yourself. And finally, Priyanki, who went to Harvard after our program. Designation put me far ahead of so many of my Harvard classmates. I came out of each project with something tangible we could present, not just a framework, because of designation. So we hope that you all will join the community. We hope we can speak with you about any questions or other things you'd like to talk about today or in the future. We would love to hear from you again. Please, those of you who are in person here, feel free to stick around. Now we'll open it up to any questions from anybody who's remote. This is Bernadette, one of our office dogs. She looks like a little Muppet. Any questions from anybody here in the room?
What specs for like you said everybody's going to use Macs, or use Macs?
Yeah.
What specs do you recommend?
So the question is specs for a Mac laptop. We've seen people, so it differs a little bit between people who think they're going to do UX and people who think they're going to do UI. UI is a much more, you need to use programs that just require a lot more processing speed. UX folks, we've generally found that even the MacBook Airs are pretty effective for that. But then also the regular laptops, I think we recommend the 2014, 2015 ones, and then the 2016, 2017 ones, the ones with the touch bar. Those are all fine, but you don't need, for example, like a CD drive or a DVD drive or anything on there. And then for UI folks, we definitely recommend one of the higher end Macs that has a better processing speed, has maybe a bigger screen. People generally work between different windows and working on different tabs and everything, so the ability to work with that is really good. We don't encourage people, if you want to have like an additional screen or something at home, you can do that. We have a few screens in our space here, especially when you get into the in-person phases that you can use monitors to work with. We encourage people to, if they would feel more comfortable using a trackball or a mouse or a Wacom tablet or something to that effect, be able to use those also. Those are not provided nor are they recommended by the program. Yes.
Our first remote question is, what's designation mean? I thought it was a play on Design Nation, and I was pronouncing it wrong.
My favorite question.
Yeah, the favorite question. No, it means it means it means what it means. Yeah. I think we encourage people to call themselves, to go through the program, to call themselves designers from day one. Those of you who maybe ask questions that use the word student in them, notice how I did not say student back to you, I said designer. It's a big deal for us that we don't like to consider people who go through the program as students, because we want people to take responsibility for their actions and be able to own their career path going forward. So designation, a designation is a title that we can bestow, that somebody bestows on somebody else. It's a category of a person, and it's a quality. And we, I think, originally did give a little bit of that Design Nation plan words, that we are a community. And when we began, we were only 15 or 20 people, and now we're 500 people. And we have 150 career mentors and 300 or 190 clients. And we have hundreds of hiring partners. And so these are thousands upon thousands of people around the world who are part of our designation. And that's a great thing to be able to look back on and see right now. Any other questions?
No, just awesome, thanks.
Any other questions here in the room? Emily, can I put you on the spot? I just want to say one thing to everybody here as a graduate.
Do it. Do it. It gave me confidence to do all of the things that I felt like I wasn't happy at my job. I spent 6 months in a job that I hated, and I said, I don't even know what to do. And this was like, oh, this was the thing I should be doing. And I have amazing friends that I went through the program with that are still people that I'm, you guys, this happened at work, what do I do? And they're like, message me back in 5 seconds. So it's a great community. I couldn't have asked for a better support system after the fact. And I just got a new job through people here. So I can answer more specific questions if you have them.
Any other questions from, oh, okay.
Yes, so.
Nope.
Well, it's sort of a repeated question. Is there a suggested Mac model for class, especially with all the varying programs and software? Yeah, minimum gigabytes, etc. Wondering if a new laptop has to be purchased.
I don't think I heard the repeated question.
Yeah, so we generally recommend getting one of the 2015 or 2017 models. I forget the years now, but the last one that came before the touch bar and the ones with the touch bar. Those are generally recommended. We've seen plenty of UX-focused designers who do the UX-focused track do really well with the MacBook Air. So that can be really effective, the newer versions of the MacBook Air. But I think we see people in this program who are doing the program in this cohort now who have the laptops going back to 2012. So the higher processing speeds of those can be really effective also. Yeah, we do have a discount with Apple. You get like an 8% discount on getting a laptop. It's not much, but it's a little something. And then we have a lot of discounts with our software partners too. Share.
Additionally, you receive those discount codes as soon as we receive your payment for Design Essentials. So if you apply and are accepted way in advance, you can play with that software way in advance. That can be part of pre-work or prep.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Are there any like hard skills you recommend to learn before going into the program?
I don't think so. The question was, are there any hard skills that we recommend learning before the program? I don't think so. I think Design Essentials is a great introduction to a lot of those pieces of software. You know, I think I would say like start to study the things you use on a daily basis. Like understand why does everybody use Facebook? Why does everybody use the Washington Post? Why does everybody use, you know, these apps and these tools? Like, if you can start to understand the design decisions and the sort of the underlying concepts and ideas behind why these things exist, that's a good like peek into the matrix. That starts to get you to understand, is this something that I'm even interested in learning more about? That's probably my recommendation to do beforehand, and not going necessarily too far deep in that, but once you start to understand these things, then you can do a lot of research about why these design decisions are made, why these patterns exist, and things like that. Do you have any recommendations, Doug?
I just want to say this on Mike's behalf. I think if any of you have written a paper, if you guys have, communicated, by writing, that's a good thing. Because if you're doing UX, you'll probably end up doing a lot of writing. You'll be writing scripts, you'll be writing research plans. A lot of that is just you guys externalizing your thought process. So if you can write fairly decently, you're in pretty shape. I know it sounds kind of like a basic thing, but when you get career phase and you start writing your resume and other things, it's a really important skill to have in hand. It doesn't mean that you have to phone up on it before you get into the program. It's just something that is just kind of a great baseline thing to. And for anybody who's an ESL student, I just want to sort of say, ESL designer, someone who is considering being a designer in our program who does not have English as a primary language, there's a lot of leeway, and we work with a lot of different languages when they come to the program. We've had a lot of successful people. We have a lot of people who are Ukrainian, Russian, what else we had?
A lot from South Korea.
South Korea, yes, yeah. So I was going to say, even though I'm stressing writing skills, I'd say there's lots of leeway when it comes to if English happens to not be your primary language. So yes. So,
practicing that is definitely a good idea. Also, the journaling part, the sort of self-reflection about understanding just how you make decisions and how you grow as a person on a daily basis. You don't have to start a journal today to be able to do that, but just getting comfortable with that as a way of measuring your progress through a particular challenge. It's very, very valuable. Anybody else? Yeah.
How many people come in here already knowing whether they want to do UI or UX? Or do some come into the first phase and then decide?
Yeah. So the question is, how many people come into designation, come into start Design Essentials knowing that they want to do UX or UI, and how many decide kind of on the fly or during the course of the phase? I would say, what, half maybe? Less than half?
I just started tracking this a month or two ago. Almost very, very few people really know. And the way that Design Essentials is structured is so that you can sort of build a vocabulary for both UX and UI, understand which deliverables you are interested in making, and then you have discussion with James, who will sort of take into consideration what your deliverables look like and what your career goals are, and then he'll advise you on which path might be best for you.
Yeah.
I would add that it's not uncommon for people to come in thinking they have a pretty clear picture of which track they want to go on, and then changing their mind later on and realizing, I thought I wanted to do UX, but UI is for me.
Anybody else? Any questions from folks? All right. Why don't we call it?
Oh, wait, one more.
Yes, one more.
Sorry. Before you go. What is the graduation rates for the program?
Graduation rate, that is a good question. So what's the graduation rate of the program? We measure that in a couple of different ways. Primarily how we translate that is, what's the rate of people finishing Design Essentials? For the most part, there's some amount of washout that happens in every cohort by the end of Design Essentials. There are some people who will pay the $1,000 fee and then just ghost on every email from the creative director. They will not be present. They'll not do anything about it. And we have to ask them to leave because they're not demonstrating potential for success. So I would say 20% of every cohort in Design Essentials doesn't make it the virtual phase. But when you get to the virtual phase, starting that and going all the way through the end of the program, the finishing rate is something like 98.5%. I mean, it's huge. We very, very rarely ask somebody to leave, or people very rarely make themselves leave the program in any one of those phases. It's very, very rare. Like, it probably happens once or twice a year. So it's very, very rare, and it's really that first instance of design essentials that really is the measuring tool. All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. We really appreciate your time, and feel free to ask us any questions. A bunch of us will be here afterward, and we're happy to answer any questions for you. Thank you everybody who is remote. We really appreciate having you here. Look forward to talking with you guys soon. So thanks everybody. Have a great night.